There are moments in life that define you, experiences that change you, transform you from who you were into who you are meant to be. We can often only identify them thanks to the wisdom of hindsight long after they've passed, but in rare occasions, we can feel them as they're happening. The catalyst that sends a charge through our minds and bodies, affecting every cell of our being. A song, a book, a movie. I've always immersed myself in art. It's been my escapism, refuge, friend, teacher. It shaped me again and again and again. Sometimes painfully, art has dug deeper than I ever wished it to, picking at wounds I had tried to pretend were already healed, summoning demons I had never known were hunting me, bringing my darkness to light. Other times, it's taken me higher than I had ever dreamed to fly, shown me beauty I never thought existed, made it feel like all the hurt and hardship I've gone through was worth it, just so I could live this one moment of such beauty and power. All I could do was ask to no one in particular, have you ever seen anything so full of splendor? Today, I'd like to share with you one of these experiences, when, with no warning and no pretension or expectation of my own, my life, as well as my whole perception of what art could achieve, changed forever. All when I dared to gaze into The Hole.
You think it's a joke?
No, it's serious.
The Hole is a 2003 film directed by Wash West of the male homosexual explicit erotica variety, or, as some narrow-minded simpletons would dismissively and homophobically categorize it, gay porn. It parodies Gore Verbinski's 2002 horror movie, The Ring, an American remake of Hideo Nakata's 1998 classic Japanese horror film, Ringu, itself adapted from Koji Suzuki's 1991 novel of the same name. The original story follows a journalist as they investigate the mystery and origin of a cursed videotape that kills whoever watches it 7 days later, hoping to break the curse in time to save their own lives and the lives of their loved ones. Being an adaptation of an adaptation of an adaptation, The Whole borrows elements of both the movies and the novel, mainly changing, however, the nature of the very curse itself. Here, the tape does not kill, but instead,
After you watched it, the phone rings, and a voice says, in 7 days you will become gay. And 7 days later you become totally gay.
there's one simple change, and the way it's elaborated upon in the next 159 minutes is the reason why I consider this to be one of the most brilliant and important films ever made. I believe it should be taught in every anthropology, psychology, sexology, and queer theory class in the world. It's one of the most impressive studies and deconstructions of heteronormativity I have ever seen. There's so much to this movie, I can possibly hope to dissect it completely in the course of one short YouTube video. But seeing as there's about, 0 academic works made about this masterpiece, I need to talk about it. You gotta start somewhere. So why don't we start from the beginning? Chekhov's gun is a dramatic principle that dictates every element present in a story at any given time must be of relevance to it, every detail contributive to the narrative. That's something that most storytellers adhere by, but few times have I seen it so fully realized as in the opening of The Whole, when we join two friends, Josh and Pete, watching a football game. First, there's football, socially considered one of the manliest, most stereotypical parts of male heterosexual culture, thus serving as a visual shorthand to denote heterosexuality. Both Josh and Pete are wearing sport jerseys to further imply this, but the biggest and best indicator of all is the physical distance between them. While football is a socially accepted form of male bonding, toxic masculinity still forbids men from getting too close, either emotionally or physically, lest they wish to be perceived as gay, and the deliberate framing of the actors in this scene perfectly illustrates that. These men are so straight, the movie says. They abide to the toxic masculinity rules and maintain a healthy, even comical distance between their bodies, as to avoid any homoerotic implications, even though the bed is so big they could probably lie side by side without ever having to touch at all. This one shot gets the thesis of the movie rolling, and it also sets the tone of the movie.
Dude, are you gay?
Pete, I said shut the fuck up, man.
Okay, Miss Thang.
The Whole makes use of humor and irony throughout its entire runtime. particularly by using stereotypes commonly associated with gay men as signifiers of the shift to homosexuality all the characters who watch the tape go through.
Seriously, dude, cut it out. I need to think.
You rather watch this or this?
And from then on, I was a friend of Mary.
I believe the phrase is friend of Dorothy.
Just think, dude, now that we're homo-identified, we can get all those circuit parties and stuff.
Get myself a Caesar cut and start wearing lycra in the daytime.
My friends were watching Super Bowl when I was watching Queer as Folk.
Unlike much of the media made foreign by straight people, however, the whole never uses these stereotypes as a way to demean and dehumanize gay men, opting instead to lovingly acknowledge and poke fun at them, the humor coming at the expense and absurdity of the stereotyping itself, not of the people who engage in it.
But I don't feel any different.
Gay people aren't different from straight people like us.
There's all kinds of gays. I mean, look at me. I listen to punk rock, hip-hop, rock en español. Now I don't even own a single Barbra Streisand record.
Really?
Well, only the Broadway album.
Thus commenting on the way a homophobic society tends to reduce an entire group of people to a handful of characteristics.
Being gay in the abstract is very difficult to wrap your brain around. But when you meet a gay person like yourself, it's much easier.
But the movie doesn't stop there. We also see this scheme factor employed in the shameless and unapologetic way it mocks toxic masculinity.
Fuck yeah, pussy, here we come.
Yeah.
Pete is the first character with which the movie starts deconstructing our very simplistic views of sexuality. Most people tend to think of it as divided into two categories, hetero and homo. If bisexuality is acknowledged, and that is a big if, then it's the perfect center point between the two extremes, always equal in attraction. Noticing how extremely limiting this idea of something as complex as human sexuality is, back in the 40s, sexologist Alfred Kinsey did a bunch of research and came up with the Kinsey scale, which was far from being perfect, but we can mostly credit it for introducing a less binary or trinary view of sexuality to the mainstream. Unfortunately, the scale is still very much a handful of neatly separated categories by which we can define sexuality, just with more categories now. And that's not ideal, because the truth is, when we talk about human sexuality being a spectrum, it's meant less as in a color palette way, with a defined line dividing colors A and B, and more like a color gradient. And this scene, where Josh and Pete have this little exchange, is a perfect representation of that.
Did you see the videotape too?
I'm still straight, but my girlfriend's out for the night.
It's not that Pete is necessarily gay or straight or bi, it's that sexuality is a lot more nuanced than these terms. Just this week, Singer Tank spoke about sexual fluidity and experimentation, promptly getting accused of being secretly gay because most of us cannot fathom sexuality being anything other than easily defined and unchanging. But that's not true. Sexuality being a spectrum means that very few of us fall perfectly into the 100% gay or 100% straight or equal attraction to all genders categories our whole lives. The reason we're taught to think otherwise and to view heterosexuality as the default from which everything else deviates, aka compulsory heterosexuality, results from socially constructed ideas in service of political and economic interests throughout history, more specifically, capitalism. As Foucault put it in The History of Sexuality, by placing the advent of the age of sexual repression in the 17th century, after hundreds of years of open spaces and free expression, one adjusts it to coincide with the development of capitalism. It becomes an integral part of the bourgeoisie order. If sex is so rigorously repressed, this is because it is incompatible with a general and intensive work imperative. At a time when labor capacity was being systematically exploited, how could this capacity be allowed to dissipate itself in pleasurable pursuits, except in those, reduced to a minimum, that enabled it to reproduce itself? In other words, capitalism demands workforce, therefore it sanctions only the type of sexuality with the capacity to produce more workforce in order to maintain itself, repressing everything else, including mere explorations of non-heterosexual desires. The way this is enforced in men in particular is by culturally ingraining compulsory heterosexuality, homophobia, and toxic masculinity in our minds from the moment we're born. By sending us the message that straight is the only normal, and that any romantic and sexual same-sex feelings must be repressed because real men don't love and or fuck other men, unless they want to get their membership revoked. But the thing about repression is that trying to make something go away simply by ignoring it not only fucks up your mental health big time, but it's not always doable. You know in Jurassic Park when Ian Malcolm goes, life finds a way? Yeah, gay finds a way. Meaning, if you find yourself alone with a gay guy, away from the eyes and pressures of homophobia and compulsory heterosexuality, and you're horny and your girlfriend is out of town and you've had a few beers, you may decide to, as I like to call it, pull an Andrew Garfield. Which brings me back to these guys.
Fuck yeah, pussy, here we come. Yeah.
A couple of years ago, there was a study conducted for men and masculinities that found that young men were finding more emotional satisfaction in their bromances than in their romantic relationships with women. Now, the few participants of the study were very homogeneous socio-economic wise, and I'm not interested in it as like evidence of changing homosocial relationships. What caught my attention was the reasons the participants gave for feeling this way. See, they claimed they felt more pressure to act manly around their girlfriends than when they were with their guy friends. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I've spoken about how toxic masculinity gets in the way of male homosocial relationships since it emphasizes sex and aggression, discouraging emotional vulnerability and intimacy between men. But it doesn't surprise me to hear accounts of it having the opposite effect. If you're taught to see women only as potential sexual partners, and that the way to assert your manhood and attract them is by pretending to be this unachievable ideal of manliness, it makes sense to feel more comfortable opening out to your bro than to your girlfriend, as you might fear breaking the illusion and scaring her away. But let's talk a little about bromance, one of my top 5 least favorite words. See, this word was invented to try and shield close male friendships from accusations of homosexuality. It's a self-aware wink-wink term like, yeah, we know what this looks like, but I promise, no homo, except given what we know about homosexuality, compulsory heterosexuality, and toxic masculinity, well, is it really unthinkable to wonder if sometimes, if things were different, these bromances would be yes homo?
Dude, hell with the circuit parties. I just want you. I love you, dude.
I love you, dude.
So, Benny Benson here is the journalist trying to find out the tape's origin in hopes to stop the curse. He's mostly aided by Josh, who, shortly after Benny sees the tape, confesses his attraction to him, to which Benny replies,
I mean, it's fine for you, but I don't want to be gay. I'm gonna fight this. Sorry.
The next day, Benny buys himself a pornographic magazine because this was made in 2003 and broadband wasn't everywhere yet, so this magazine still existed. He starts pleasuring himself to pictures of a female model, fantasizing about her. However, shortly after, his fantasy changes to a different object of desire. The male model who was having intercourse with the actress in the pictures. And when it's time for him to reach his climax, Benny pointedly chooses to do so on... Later, when Benny and Josh find nothing to explain where the tape came from, they go back to the cabin where Benny first watched it. That's when Benny realizes he's out of time.
Shit, I'm out of time.
Josh calls attention to one small detail,
Hey, something weird.
What?
You didn't get the phone call.
which is promptly shrugged off as...
Maybe you're not gay,
Maybe I'm not.
but maybe you are.
Maybe I am.
How are we gonna find out?
But then, the plot twist.
Wait a minute. The clock stopped. What time is it?
Yes? You're gay. I already know that.
So, Benny acted on his desire for Josh before the curse was completed. The suggestion of it was enough to give him the courage to do so. Just like Tom and Eric before were able to identify their feelings as love, romantic love, once the rules of compulsory heterosexuality were taken out of their lives by an external force, Benny's belief that the same had happened to him was enough to get him to be honest with himself and Josh, and to give in to his true desires. This is when the movie foreshadows it.
I love you, dude.
I love you, dude.
And this is when he murders compulsory heterosexuality.
You're gay. I already know that.
How many other men out there, the Toms and the Erics, the Joshes and the Bennys, the ones dismissing and hiding any and all possibilities as man crushes and bromances, will live their lives differently were they not raised under a cruel system that demonizes pleasure and human nature in the purpose of perpetuating itself? This is the host's message, its mission, to expose the fragility and artificiality of heteronormative norms and how they affect male homosocial relationships. In 1985, Nick Zedd published what he called the Cinema of Transgression Manifesto, in which he stated, "We who have violated the laws, commands, and duties of the avant-garde, i.e. to bore, tranquilize, and obfuscate through a fluke process dictated by practical convenience, stand guilty as charged. We openly renounce and reject the entrenched academic snobbery which erected a monument to laziness known as structuralism, and proceeded to lock out those filmmakers who possess the vision to see through the charade. We violate the command and law that we bore audiences to death in rituals of circumlocution, and propose to break all the taboos of our age by sinning as much as possible. This act of courage is known as transgression. We propose transformation through transgression, to convert, transfigure, and transmute into a higher plane of existence in order to approach freedom in a world full of unknowing slaves." Zedd wrote this to define the underground movements of the 70s and 80s by filmmakers such as John Waters, who violated film and social conventions in their work. For what is a greater transgression than questioning and challenging the very systems society is built for? And that's what The Hole did, and that's why I love it so much. And that's why I'm not joking when I say that it's one of the most brilliant movies I've ever seen in my life. The movie kept the spirit of Zedd's manifesto alive almost 2 decades later, and I will very much call it cinema of transgression. The stroke of genius of The Hole was to take what David Chaskin, screenwriter of A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, described as straight man's greatest fear.
And I started thinking about guys being like unsure of their sexuality. And I thought, well, that's pretty scary.
It cursed them with its fear and gave them no choice but to face it, to live it. And in the end, it suggested that perhaps the real horror was the chains we didn't notice were there all along. The curse only gave us the strength to break free from them. In the end, the curse was actually a gift.
Before you die, you see the ring. You see the ring. You see the ring. You see the ring. You saw it.
You want to go again? Oh, it's rock and roll. Anal sex is the bomb.